We are, man.
All right.
We are.
I'd like to call this meeting to order. Will you please stand with me and recite the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Moving to our agenda. The first item is our Commission Weekly Reports, and we usually start with Commissioner Moore.
Okay, I will try not to disappoint. Here we go. I do want to let everyone know or remind everyone that there is the Cascadia drill this week, so be prepared for lots of activity up around the port area. There will be Army and Navy and helicopters, and so what it is a drill because it is preparing us for when we have the big earthquake. We're anticipating that our Shelton Airport will be one of the few on the West Coast that will be intact. So it's a good thing, and it's kind of cool for Mason County. We're hoping that all of these guys are going to stop in our stores and eat our food and come back and visit when they're finished with the drill. Today, I do want to announce that we had the 100-day challenge to end family homelessness. It was a celebration of the 100-day challenge at the Governor's Mansion. It was a great event. Lots of people attended. 3 counties 103 days ago formed teams. Our team at Mason County was called Team Enterprise, and it was because we felt like we were on the Starship Enterprise when we were starting, and we did an awesome job in Mason County. We ended up with, just out of many families that were unhoused, we ended up with just 5 that are unhoused at this time, and we're working on that. Lewis County and Thurston County had similar results. Just a real coordinated effort and more of a plan to get the families in, get through the process and get them housed. And so the more that we can build on this, and the more enthusiasm we can get as we're going forward and making great progress, we're hopeful that we can get more landlords interested in participating in programs to get families off the street. So it was a really good event, and I was very thankful that Commissioner McDowell and Mayor Krantz attended. Y'all both had to leave early, but I did pick up a door prize for each of you.
Wow.
And thank you very much for attending. I know you're going to be extra supportive in the days to come.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So that was today. On Wednesday, I have a Housing Coalition meeting, which I'm sure I will get even more in-depth information from the results of the 100-day challenge. We're also talking to Homes First about our veterans housing project, and that's moving along really well. I'm very excited about that. We're anticipating having housing for 6 homeless vets in the very near future. So that's been a real goal, and that's aside from the 100-day challenge. So stay tuned. We also this week have a reception for our finalists for the city administrator position, and also the interviews later this week too. I hope y'all enjoyed the Forest Festival parade. I tried to wave at everybody. So thank you for coming tonight. And that's my week.
Thank you. Commissioner McDowell?
Well, I too went to the event at the Governor's Mansion today, and it was very nice. And as I sat and listened to the program, I was very impressed about, given the opportunity, people will come out and help when we have issues like this in our community. They just have to get a little bit of a nudge. But all 3 counties, I was very impressed with the amount that, it was exciting. So I was there today, and tomorrow morning I have my left board, which is law enforcement officers, firefighters. It's the managing of their pension funds when they retire. That's tomorrow morning. Wednesday, our reception from 6 to 8 here at the Civic Center to meet our 5 candidates that will be interviewed. Thursday, an all-day interview with our 5 candidates, and Friday or Thursday night, so I'm going to be there all day and then run over to choice graduation at the high school, up at the high school on Thursday night. My granddaughter is graduating. I know I
Okay.
don't look old enough.
No. Is that
That's
complete?
right.
Thank you very
I'm
much.
done.
I was also there at the governor's mansion today, nice place, I could live there. It was, what was exciting is I think this is the most effective of an organized effort to help with homelessness that I've seen, and I've been thinking about it, talking about it, and traveling around the state. But they organized this 100-day thing, and the results were phenomenal. It was the best help in that area of anything I've seen. And it can be, I believe, a template that can then go to all of the other cities. Because, the deal is to maintain that, and so I was really thrilled with it was the most effective I've seen of anything to dealing with the issue. So it was exciting today. Wednesday morning, I will be at the Skookum Rotary meeting. In the evening, of course, attending that reception. And then Thursday, all-day interviews for the new administrator position. That completes our commission reports. Next is a general public comment opportunity. And do we have somebody that is signed in to speak?
We have Marilyn Vogler.
Marilyn Vogler, 420 East Poplar. Good evening, Commissioners. A short while back, I think it may have been a couple of months, we were briefed on the Downtown Creek project, and you voted to go ahead with that grant-funded project. The project involved capping rather than daylighting Shelton Creek. It involved spending 25% of the estimated annual revenue from the Transportation Benefit District on a project that includes no roads. And it supports a process that shows the real downside of what grant dollars can mean if they're not handled efficiently and responsibly. But the bureaucrats in Olympia have given you all a reprieve. And some change in paperwork requirements brought this issue back to you once again. And so you have another chance to reconsider. You opted last week to put this on the consent calendar. Now, I know we're the city, not the county, but I want to take that as a model because the county commission agendas include a phrase about their action agenda, which I take to be comparable to our consent agenda. All items listed under the action agenda may be enacted by one motion unless a commissioner or citizen requests an item be removed from the action agenda and considered as a separate item. And so as a citizen, I request that you remove the Downtown Creek project from the consent calendar and consider it as a separate item. I think the people of Shelton deserve a recorded vote on this measure. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Anybody else signed in?
Yes. Lisa Renfro.
Hi, thank you. And a couple.
Just state your name for the record, please.
Yes, Lisa Renfro, thank you. I hear that there's a stamp advisory from the post office service for epidemics. And like 10 years ago, they said homelessness wasn't an epidemic, so they couldn't consider it to have, the stamp set go for charities. So I didn't know now, is it, and could the arts program and have different artists try to design one to see if they would like to submit it for the next epidemic, or whatever the post office would consider. But if we had artists to give ideas, maybe they would consider, because they would know people were interested in doing that for futuristic homelessness. Another question that I had was, do you think it's possible or practical or realistic to have like a boat that's like the rolling Mississippi, with the paddle boats in the Oakland Bay areas? Because if they have the trains and they're going to generate it with coal, I don't know how they're going to run it, as like a steam engine or not. For people to want to stay in the motels longer, it would be nice for them to have a little dinner, or if they got married, a honeymoon or weekend tour, if they can use that for recreational with Parks and Recs or something to keep people in the area longer and spend more money.
Thank you.
Lisa always has such great ideas.
Yeah, very creative ideas.
Yeah, I love it. Actually, I love that idea, and I think that possibly they had something like that back in the day. I just was going to tell you that our trains will be diesel. Diesel or steam, depending on which, but thank you for the ideas.
Also, the stamp, it would be great to generate some local artists on that, but I think you would probably take it up with the Postal Service as far as that goes. But that would be great to, generate some local artists to do something.
The community here can get the artists together to have,
Well, that would be the art, that would be Mr. Ziegler.
Ziegler can pull that one. He can do that one, I'm
Right
sure.
here, the desk.
Whoa, too bad you showed up tonight, huh?
Yeah, another job for you.
We do have the consent agenda coming up, and I want to address Marilyn's concern. First is, we've never pulled something from an agenda because someone from the group that's coming here suggests that. So we've never done that before. I'm not saying it's a bad idea. But I will say that from this discussion on this creek project over here, from the very beginning, I, along with all of the commissioners I've dealt with, are, number one, very concerned that every penny that we can get from the Transportation Benefit District goes into payment. That's something very clear to all of us. But we're faced with one project where I believe the amount of grant money is like, if I'm right, $425,000 to do something. Our part of that, I believe, was $40,000. If I'm wrong, then, I'm going to go approximate. I'm going to say a lot of approximate. That's a lot of grant money to help on a project downtown. I am very sympathetic to wanting to put the majority of that benefit district money into payment. We had talks about it. We've talked about retreats. We talked about it to death. I made a decision that for the $425,000 worth of money to be put into downtown on a project, matching with like a $40,000 from our part, that in that case, that 20 or 25% of that, I didn't want to do it, but I looked at it and I said, we can't afford to turn away that amount of grant money. And so I made a conscious decision to say everything was done transparent, everything is done transparent, and that I just, on that point, agreed that that's a lot of grant money, and I felt we needed to do that, and that's how I felt on that. But my other two commissioners, if they feel now, before we go on this consent agenda, want to say anything more, because it's on the consent agenda, and I want to vote yes on that. But you brought up a good question. We're talking about it a little bit here, and I just know that's a lot of money to accept or not accept, and I feel we need to do that. So I don't know if there's any other conversation about that. That's where I am on that. So are we ready for? Yeah.
Did you have a comment on that?
No.
Because I do.
Okay.
I do. I also can appreciate that point, and I actually would have no problem moving it into old business but it would take two of us to do that. If not, then I do have more conversation on it as far as the consent agenda, so.
I think this would be before we go into the consent agenda, this would be the time to talk if you wanted to talk.
Okay.
about that.
What, Marilyn and I have talked, and definitely in our visioning process, we have talked about the value of daylighting the creeks. And that would still be my preference everywhere that we can. I've been talking extensively with John Bolander, who's with the Mason Conservation District, and they potentially will have some money and some design to help us out with that. It's my understanding that if that we can add that to the project later or take that away from, that we can fit that into the project. But the importance right now, and I hope that Pete will correct me if I'm wrong on this, you're on the spot, is that we need to get the money committed, because if we don't do it, we're in trouble with DOT. And so, as I mentioned a couple weeks ago, I also want to incorporate some type of public art into the sidewalk project. And I definitely am hoping that we can work out a partnership with the Conservation District to daylight the creeks. They have additional money that they would be able to put towards projects like that, and definitely the interest and the expertise. But I also am in favor of, for this one project, finishing our match with the Transportation Benefit District money. And for the same reason, it's a project that we really need to do. We have lots of problems in that area. And some of the projects that we're going to be using that money for will involve sidewalks. It's just part of doing a complete streets. So it hasn't been forgotten, but I haven't stopped working on the idea of daylighting the creeks and also the incorporation of art. And so that's my feeling on that.
So we just have a decision to make here, and I guess I would be not opposed to staff entering into the conversation, because personally I do not want to lose $425,000 in grant money, if that's the right number. And so if we don't lose that money, I am open to put this on hold or work out a daylighting. I don't have any problem against that, but we have a design that somehow came around, and here we are, at the consent agenda. So if staff wants to weigh in on, if my numbers are wrong, correct me now, because that's what that's what I think I heard is, so it's, I turn the meeting over to Pete Butkus at this time and see if he wants to shed any more light on this conversation.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, but you have to speak into the little box that's on the.
Green light.
Yeah, and also that's only, the volume on that mic only goes into that. That thing is the speaker for the room.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mr. Clark, the Public Works Director, is not here tonight because he thought this was going to be on consent. His advice of counsel, therefore, wasn't necessary. We do try and keep him down to 48 hours a week. But here's my comments. You have previously entered into an agreement with the state for them to provide financial assistance. Sidewalks and bike paths, I will add, are generally considered to be part of a transportation system because we also encourage pedestrians to, in lieu of driving, walk, and bicycles in lieu of driving to walk. And I believe that the state statute on transportation benefit district includes those purposes under the legal definition of transportation. So let me get that one out of the way. From my perspective, where I sit, you either have a choice, which was offered to you in discussion by the public last week, of turn the money back and move on and don't do anything, or move ahead and do something. At that time, the three of you elected by consensus to move ahead and do something and put it on the consent agenda. So that's where we're at today. If you as a body wish to pull that off, then we're rapidly approaching the timeline where we need to decline the state financial assistance and move ahead with what are we going to do long-term for the infrastructure issues surrounding the creek covering. I've had a little bit of experience in opening up bodies of water for people to get to them, and it's a really positive thing, but it can be more costly than simply recovering the creek. Because if you remove the sidewalk covering, put the sidewalk somewhere else, you essentially have a creek in a concrete box. And frankly, they're not very aesthetically pleasing. If you're going to daylight a creek, you need to take the time to allow it to meander, to place the proper amount of rock or gravel with it, and it probably, and I'll admit I'm kind of flying by the seat of my pants on this statement, probably is going to be grossly in excess of what your transportation monies are going to be able to fund. Long-term, it may make sense, let's call it intermediate term, it may make sense to get this proposal in, make a verbal inquiry with the state to find out if they would allow some minor daylighting, and then do an option on the design. Straight removal, utility work that's going to be involved with gas company and so on, and recap the creek versus do the utility work and maybe daylight part of the creek as a demonstration project. Once you know how many dollars it costs for, say, 200 feet of creek daylighting, you'll have a good idea if you're able to proceed on doing other creek daylighting in the city. You've got a figure to work from, and then you can weigh that against all the other demands you get for the expenditures or investment of public funds. So, in summation, I think it's a choice. If you want to go ahead, you can hold up you can lock in the money, but it's going to require some staff work, and we recognize that on our end to get this thing going with an alternative in it for some sort of a partial daylighting or not. It would come back to you as the legislative body to make that decision.
That's an excellent
That
suggestion.
sounds great.
Very good.
That sounds great.
That gets the project, gets the money locked in,
Yeah.
and then we can work if there's some alternatives to make it better, because, I mean, working together is how we're going to make this thing work. So what we'll do at this point, I believe, is go forward with the consent
Yes.
agenda and take those suggestions that our acting city administrator has given and see if there's some room later on to enact a more of a daylighting effect on that.
I do have a question.
Sure.
This 425,000, this is grant money. This isn't transportation district money, is it?
No, but our match, our $40,000 match
We-
is
we-
kind of,
Right.
Yeah.
So, okay. So,
I believe that's the way it works.
yeah. Okay, so we'll take 40,000 from the transportation.
That's right.
benefit.
Is-
Okay.
Is that number correct? That's what I was remembering about 45 for the,
Right in there, I think so.
I'm looking, because I mean, I'm approximate on my numbers,
But,
always.
so, I agree, transportation benefit district money, there were 4 things in it, the streets, sidewalks, crosswalks, and streetlights. And I consider those the 4 that go in the transportation benefit district things that we can do with our money. Okay, so I got that straight. Thank you.
so, and just for the record, since we're talking this to death, I do want it to become part of our consideration as we are using the transportation benefit district money and we are doing paving projects, to at least always consider the option of partnerships so that we can daylight the creeks. And I know that through, I've had lots of talks with the Conservation District, and that also is a goal of theirs. So I think if we be more creative with the partnerships, that even if it doesn't work out for this particular project, in the future, if we have maybe an alternate design when we're paving, that it would be more cost-effective.
I think that's an excellent suggestion. So,
Good.
are we ready for a reading of the consent agenda?
Yes.
Could we please have a reading of the consent agenda?
Consent agenda, vouchers numbered 11782 through 11842 in the amount of $834,464.41. Commission meeting minutes from executive session of May 9th, 2016, study session of May 9th, 2016, business meeting of May 16th, 2016, and study session of May 23rd, 2016. Downtown Creek Project Local Agency Project Prospectus, authorizing the mayor to sign and city administrator to make any necessary budget modifications. C Street Landfill Remedial Action Grant in the amount of $215,000.
So is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I move that we approve the consent agenda as read.
I second it.
There's a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. The agenda passes. No old business tonight, but there are some items under new business, and the first is going to be a presentation by us, lengthy, I hope, by our Parks and Recreation Director, Mark Ziegler. Only joking
Good evening, Commissioners.
on the lengthy thing.
It'll be brief. Once again, bring to you on behalf of the Shelton Arts Commission recommendations for the Shelton Civic Center Rotating Art Gallery. The next 3-month term is starting this month in June, would run through the end of August. The City of Shelton called for submittals from artists with a deadline of May 31st. We had 4 artists submit their proposals for the gallery. The Shelton Arts Commission met on June 1st to jury those submittals. I believe you have copies of the work of recommendations going around up front. And today we're bringing to you those recommendations of 3 artists and a total of 8 pieces to be displayed. Sacarea Becerra works in acrylics and has 2 pieces. Dean Bird, local photographer, 3 pieces from him. And Steve Hendrickson, 3 pieces as well. 2 of these artists are kind of working the abstracts, and Dean's a local photographer, so we obviously have
Do they have
some.
titles for these?
Pardon me?
Do they have titles for these?
They do, yeah. That, I believe, is Orange Ground 2015. Yeah.
And what's
So
the name of the
that's
one?
one of the abstracts.
And then that one?
Let's see, Yellow Dominant, and those were both Steve, the Orange Ground and Yellow Dominant are both Steve Hendrickson, and the one in Commissioner Moore's left hand is from Sacarea, and it's What Love Creates.
All right.
These are so cool.
I love the photography.
This is Power Poles Under Moonlight, right?
And so this is very cool.
And
Is it Crown Point? Where is that? No, it isn't.
that's North Head, up on Long Beach, North Head Lighthouse.
Old House Under Stars?
Let's see, Sadist Creek Mansion, I believe is the title of that, and then Full Moon Over the Palouse is the other with the,
Oh,
Cool.
it's beautiful.
Yeah.
and the representation that you see on the paper is never quite as,
Yeah.
It always looks
as
better.
good as the actual pieces.
Oh, these are just gorgeous.
Tonight, staff is asking for consent, so we can get the work up. The previous gallery work has been removed, the wall is blank, and the Arts Commission would appreciate approval tonight if the commission agrees to move forward and get new art up on the wall.
Well, this is a public action, a proposed action item, so if there's any public comment, now would be the time. I think we're leaning into okaying things, so that was help somebody. So nobody's come to sign in on this. So I guess at this time, do we all concur that this is nice art to put on our city wall?
Absolutely,
Okay,
yes.
so,
I can't wait to see the real
Yes.
stuff.
you need a motion?
Oh,
Well, let me take a look at my fine print and see if that's correct. You wrote it, so.
well, I could make a motion.
Yeah, it looks like we need to request a motion.
Okay. I move that we approve this recommended art for installation on June 7th and to remain in place until August 31st of this year.
I second that.
There's a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The art goes on the wall. Thank
Good
you.
job, Mark.
Next is a comprehensive plan update by our Community and Economic Development Director, Steve Goins.
Thank you, Mayor and Commissioners. Let me take a minute to pass out a draft of the various elements we'll be discussing.
No way. Thank you. I need this one.
You can take the phone.
I meant the real one.
I feel like I've had this little 3-minute interlude a dozen times already. We're updating the comprehensive plan here. And What I've passed out is 3 of the elements. 2 of these are very brief elements, and that's why I combined them in this briefing. The parks element and the historic preservation element, and the larger one is the Shelton Urban Growth Area Plan element. In summary, the plan is really just trying to bring some of these elements up to speed, up to current time, and that includes things like referencing things that are maybe older, replacing that language with things that are newer. In terms of the park element, I didn't delve into changing or drafting proposals for changing policies, but if you would like to revisit those, that's part of the reason we get this out there. We get public feedback, and we bring that back at a future time where we can discuss those types of changes. That same thing would apply with the historic preservation element. There hasn't been a lot of changes that would result in a big change in the element itself, but if there's something you'd like to modify there, something you'd like to see, this is an opportunity to get that feedback and bring that back for future consideration. At this point, we're just trying to get a draft out there for this public review. And we're moving very close now to having all these different elements out in a draft form. The last element I'll spend a little more time discussing is the urban growth area plan element. When this element was drafted, we created the Shelton Urban Area Plan. That was probably in the mid-90s, I'd say about 94, 95 era. We had completed a comprehensive plan update subsequent to that, but at that time the plan was still relatively new. But now the plan, as it's drafted, is about 20 years old. There's a number of things in there that were dated that I changed in the language that you have before you. A number of those things affect some of our utilities. You may recall 20 years ago, we didn't even have a sewer comprehensive plan. We had a regional plan. We had different pieces of plans that we were trying to meld into a plan, which we ultimately did. And so those are kind of things that are changed and modified in the plan you see now. I should point out there's another important piece to this that we'll be getting to later in the year. As you're aware, we've contemplated an urban growth area expansion. There's actually 2 that are in the process of being reviewed. Later this summer, we'll have an environmental impact statement out to review the impacts of those areas. One is called the Goldsboro Heights area. The second is the Dayton Airport Road Commercial Industrial Center. Those are discussed in this element draft as you have it now. That dialogue will change as that process moves further along. We'll get feedback from the county, we'll get feedback from the community at large, and that draft language will probably change repeatedly before we finally get to a draft that we're contemplating as part of the approval. But this is a starting place. So if you have comments or questions on those elements, now is the time to get that kind of feedback. I'm not looking for it tonight by any stretch, just as time goes by. And as I stated, we'll be bringing for the environmental impact statement for those larger areas, and we anticipate having a planned action ordinance on those as well later in the year, but we have some time.
So, yeah, we take these home with us and then read them and talk to you. And
good night reading is
yeah,
what those
nice.
are, yes.
That's how I like to do it at nighttime, is read your stuff.
That's right.
10 minutes for sleep.
Any other questions or comments for Steve about this?
Thank you,
Okay,
Steve.
thank you, Steve.
Okay.
All right, so next is an administration report, and I saw something that I think our acting city administrator, Pete Butkus, has for us. So I'll turn the meeting over to him at this time.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. Members of the commission and the public had expressed an interest in knowing more about the Grove Street fire, a recent incident which occurred just 3 blocks here from City Hall. And I thought it would be useful to do kind of a consolidated report with the 4 departments that were involved in an alphabetical order. Those are community development, fire, police, and public works. They all had substantial portions of responsibility dealing with the building before the fire, during the fire, and after the fire. I'm not going to read it. The report's certainly available to the public, and I hope they get a chance to peruse it if they're all interested. But it's broken down into the incident, post-incident, where some questions arose about some issues. I particularly talked about issues or questions identified in the resolution and acknowledged the that all 4 departments and some other people were all involved in the activity. I'll note for the commission that we talk about the incident and the incident map so you can kind of understand the setting, especially if you look at the water main size in the area. What we did to clean up the site, at what point we determined this was not a fire of an unknown origin, but actually an arson, and the police became directly involved. And as you know from a previous news release, a suspect or a person of interest was identified, became a suspect, was arrested, and is currently residing at the Mason County Hotel. But there were some questions that came up that I think the memo could just help address very directly. First of all, water supply at the fire location. There was some issue with trying to use 2 fire engines or pumpers from 1 hydrant. That was resolved operationally by taking the required water supply to another hydrant a block away from one of the engines, and the problem was basically resolved. This isn't a shortcoming of the water system. Actually, the fire flow in the area is adequate. And I particularly want to emphasize that the issue with the 1 hydrant is not related to water supply, water storage, or a larger water distribution issue. It's specific at that particular corner. An interesting thing happened in the discussion when you got departments together. It determined that fire didn't have information on which hydrants gave more water versus less water, but Public Works does have the information, and we now have a joint and cooperative effort between the 2 departments to start identifying fire hydrants over time as they're repainted with a color coding that meets a national standard, so that when the fire engine arrives, the officer at the scene can say, oh, we think we'll have sufficient supply here to supply 1 or 2 engines, or we need to put 1 engine here and 1 a block away to make this thing work. Pretty simple act, and I just want to commend both Public Works and Fire for stepping up and making that work. The building itself has long been on the list for abatement and code enforcement activities. That's also involved responses to the site by police and fire. As you may recall, in past years, you've had money to take on 1 or 2 buildings for abatement. Frankly, this was a judgment call that was made. We could do 2 buildings elsewhere for the same amount of money that it would have cost to take on this building. That's the kind of decisions we're faced with in government with limited resources, and I have nothing to say except we did it. So beyond that, a question always comes up at major fires with any hydrocarbons, gasoline, diesel fuel, whatever released, and the answer is no. There was none released. There's no evidence of it in the storm sewer system or Goldsboro Creek. Good news. Cleanup, including the disposal, was rather substantial. It looks like it's going to be about $20,600. The vast majority of that is in tonnage fees, and those bricks individually are light, but together they weigh a bit, to the Mason County landfill. Again, I most noted acknowledgments that Mason County was most helpful. They extended the landfill hours so we can get the site cleaned up and hauled away in 1 calendar day. And no, we haven't determined yet how we're going to pay for the costs. That's an ongoing discussion at the staff level. Obviously, it will be paid for one way or another. Acknowledgements, I want to recognize the paid and the volunteer firefighters of Central Mason Fire and EMS, and also those from Mason County Fire Districts 4 and 11 who came in to assist. Mason County Public Works, their solid waste unit, and Shelton Police, Public Works, and Community Economic Development staff members. My final comment, which I didn't actually write in the report, when I started this effort out, I thought, you know, is there going to be a policy issue here the commission needs to address? And at the conclusion of this effort, my conclusion is no, there isn't. There's not a major water flow, either transmission or storage or supply for us to take on. This was simply an unfortunate incident that fortunately had no injuries as a result of that took place in the city. And again, all 4 departments worked together exceptionally well on this, and they need to be recognized for that. So that's my consolidated report.
All right. I want to say first, thank you for writing this report and being on top of those communications and working with those departments. I think you did also a great job, so thank you very much. And it is an example of how efficient the City of Shelton's departments are in working together in emergency situations. So any more questions or comments?
I do have a question. Did the gentleman that owned that building, did he have any insurance on that at all? Would that not cover, well,
If we knew, we would tell you.
okay,
That would be one of our courses for recourse on getting the money back. The gentleman has, as I understand, a long history of being difficult to locate. I do know that his Mason County tax records, he has an Olympia address, but apparently he is no longer at that site. So I can't give you any details on how we're doing with contacting him or trying to find out, but it's part of our mental scheme, if we can, to recover the money from that.
okay, all right, thank you.
Any more questions or comments?
No.
Nope. Sounds good. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, Pete.
All right, here's another opportunity for general public comment. If somebody would like to speak, this is that opportunity. And we have somebody signed up.
We do. Randy Lewis.
Would you please come forward, state your name for the record, and give us your comment, general public.
Hi, Randy Lewis. I watched the tape last week of your meeting, including the lady from the Mason County Historical Society. I just wanted to compliment them. I've been down there several times. They have some very cool stuff down there. For example, they have the very first Saugerly. I don't know if it's the first one they printed, but it's the earliest one they have, 1912. There was a 1912 girls, Shelton High School girls basketball team, and there's a picture in that Saugerly. I thought that was very cool. So the girls playing up there at the high school, playing basketball, they're actually continuing over a 100-year tradition, so I thought that was very cool. The other cool thing that happened in a recent visit, I bought a couple tickets to the movie Ring of Fire that played down at the theater, which I went and saw. It was very cool. And if people don't know that, The Ring of Fire is a movie that was filmed around near Shelton. And it's a true story about when there was a ring of fire around Shelton that burnt down Shelton, but before Shelton burnt down, Mason County Sheriff Richard Kimball rode the train to the Shelton train depot, and all the people in the town got on the train and were rescued. They went right through the ring of fire, and then Shelton burned down. It was a true story. But the other cool thing about the Historical Society, I was kind of curious, so I went back after I saw the movie. And I said, do you have a copy of the journal that was published, the week after Shelton burned down? And they said, well, let me look. And they did. They had the copy of the journal that was published the week after Shelton burned down. And here's the headline. It said, Crotch burns down Shelton. He let all the wells go dry. He didn't listen to anybody. And that's all very true. You can go down and see for yourself. So, I thought that historical information would be, people would enjoy hearing about that. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
And a Saugerly, if no one knows what a Saugerly is, it is a yearbook. Shelton High School yearbook.
I thought it was
Irene S. Reed.
I thought it was like a saw or something.
No, Saugerly.
All right. Okay. Less drama, please. Okay. Now we have administration final touches. I believe if there's any from the department heads, any final touches? That's a little, I don't know if they explained to you what we do on this, but this is that time where if any administrator or a department head has something they want to tell us about for the future, they can speak that now. So.
I've been briefed.
Oh, all right. You already knew about that one.
So first of all, let me ask my department heads if they have any touch. Okay. To Mayor and Commission, Wendy Thompson, the interim city clerk, is working on a professional services agreement for labor negotiation services. As a reminder, we have several contracts that are coming up and due this year. And while it doesn't specify a particular person, we are working with our city attorney firm to have that service provided. That will come to you at a future time for discussion and then final action on a professional services contract. Secondly, one I've been involved in, we've been working on a new jail services interlocal governmental agreement with Mason County. I'd say we're over 60% of the way there, and I spent part of my day today making suggestions to how to make the contract stronger and easier to understand. This will come to you kind of from a combination of police and the court system and myself as a recommendation how to proceed on that. This is somewhere in the 4 to 8 weeks out. All
right, is that complete, our administration final touches?
It does.
Thank you very much. Our next meeting will be next Monday, Monday, June 13th at 2 p.m. in the afternoon. This meeting is adjourned.